Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another week of Showtime with Jordan von Haslow on Hot 702.5 FM, Las Vegas. Today, I have a very special friend joining us, Dr. Adam Ghani, all the way from the UK. Thank you so much. I know the time
Thank
difference is a bit of a
you.
is a is a bit much, but I'm so happy you're joining us, and I'm so happy to chat with you. So, the whole premise of this show is entertainment, right? I bring on friends of mine who work in the business,
Yeah.
whether they're like performers or they're writers or, they're work as, I don't know, key grips, best boys on film sets, and just to talk about things, talk about pop culture, talk about what's going on. But from that insider's perspective, per se, I should say, but you sort of fall out of that realm because you're an academic. However, the way that I first met Adam is that he popped up in the explore page of my Instagram feed, and I can't remember now. It was a clip from a soap opera, and as everyone knows, I'm a big soap fan, and I thought it was great, and I thought that the commentary below was really great, and I went to the page, and everything on your feed was like amazing. And I never, ever, ever do this, but I actually slid into his DMs and said, "Oh my goodness, your feed is my life." And the conversation just began for there. But so first of all, congratulations and on an awesome feed. I think your feed is probably one of the best feeds I've ever seen, and I never miss it. I never
Really,
miss it. I never miss it. So and you guys can check him out at Adam T. Ghani, Ghani,
yeah.
on Instagram. You'll have to check it out. So thank you again for joining us. So let's start with the feed, and then I want to talk a little bit more about you and about your work in academia. So how did you even start putting the feed together? Was it something that accidentally happened, or you just kind of posted something and people said, "Oh, that's kind of cool," so you just continued on, or did you like actually start with the intention of um, uh, uh, I want to put this together and this is what I want it to look like, etc.
Yeah, I think what I did, I always wanted to see something online that was something that I liked, in the sense that I first, everyone was on Instagram for years and years and years, and I never kind of joined the movement, I was about to say, until, quite late in the game, 2018. And I just thought, so most people post their snapshots of their lives, or apart from selfies and stuff, where they are, where they're going, what they're doing. And I just thought I want to be part of that kind of a fringe of Instagram that just posts what my interests are.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I just did it for myself, really. I just thought, oh, this is great, this is like a little page where you can kind of curate. It's almost like a diary. It's like,
Yeah.
mm, you know, I suppose in a diary you'd put what you did that day, what your emotions were that day, or whatever, how you're feeling. I express what's on my mind through the various clips, or um, various still pictures. So it just built from there. It's almost like, even if I only had 2 followers, I'd still keep at it, because I just want something that I can go back and look over from time to time, and just kind of pick up the threads of what really fascinates me. Because
Yeah.
there's kind of recurring themes in there that really kind of speak to my nature. Like, obviously there's the propensity for kind of melodrama and interpersonal relationships. It's always people, all the clips of people, whether it's kind of a soap opera or a film, it's always people talking, and it's usually about kind of relationships, or kind of where the conflict between characters. Um, so yeah, I just think it's great because it's like a kind of I think the word is polyphonic, and it's multiple perspectives. I just like this kind of notion of having all these different personalities kind of being showcased
Yeah.
in a huge curated archive.
Yeah, and like I think that that's what I love about it and what speaks to me about it. Like, I primarily I'm a vocalist, right? But I
Yeah,
also have spent a lot of time as a writer, specifically writing for soaps. And what I love more than anything are those interpersonal relationships, and what I find about that particular genre, and you also find it in the live stage as well, right? Say
Yeah.
versus like action films, is that it's not about what's happening. It's like literally about, okay, how are these people interacting with each other, and what's really the subtext
Yeah.
behind them, and what's really make it go on. I mean, I remember just the training, like when I was writing had writing Our World, and I learned how to soap write from this wonderful writer named Susan Sojourner
Yeah.
Collier, who used to write. She at one point wrote for like basically all of the ABC soaps. So she wrote across Port Charles and General Hospital and All My Children, and I don't know. I don't know if she ever hit One Life to Live. She might have hit One Life to Live at some point, but she kind of at some point,
That was always that one was always like, they call it the red-headed stepchild because it was kind of overlooked in the lineup.
Totally.
But arguably, it's the one, if you look over its history, it's the one that has dated the best. Like, it's really contemporary now because it was dealing with themes in its history that kind of all the pop culture deal with now, but it was always the innovative. Anyway, I went off on a
Well, but you're right, and that's Agnes Nixon. I mean, Agnes
yeah.
Nixon was the queen, and it's so. What I really hate is that soaps have such a bad rap. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of crappy writing, and a lot of that just has to do with the production schedule, right, and the fact that it just has to happen so quickly, and there's not a lot of time to like, you have to just go. But if you, like you say, all of those themes. I mean, I think One Life to Live was the first to, like, they dealt with the woman passing. Was her name Carla Gray, passing for white?
Right.
I think they had the first gay kid on television. I believe that was in the Ryan Phillippe's role. I think like the 80s.
That's right. I mean, All My Children had the actress from Angie as a lesbian in the 80s, but it was short-lived.
Angie became a lesbian?
It was, yeah, honestly, I can't remember what the character was called. Arc, where she was like a doctor in Pine Valley Hospital, and she was a lesbian, and she was explaining to Donna about, that she's no different from anyone else, and Donna was like kind of talking to her kid gloves. But yeah, I think the Ryan Philippe character was the first one where it was like it was like long-term storyline that wasn't dropped.
Yeah.
So, One Life to Live for sure.
And I think that people, so I was saying, I really hate that soaps get such a bad rap.
Yeah.
Just because they, as a genre, they really were at the forefront of like bringing social issues to light, right? And were the first things to really get people talking about certain things that now, like, again, we take for granted. Like, I believe it was what show was it? Like, again, I think it was, didn't Erica Kane had an abortion, and like they turned that into like a real story, and and they really explored it. I believe when Agnes Nixon was writing for, it might have been Another World. Was it the importance of like? I think she did like a breast cancer story.
I think
they had to like talk.
Guiding Light, where the Charita Bauer matriarch character, she had a pap smear.
There you go.
It made the public kind of aware that they had to get checked out, the women in the audience.
Yeah. And the fact that they were able to do it, I mean, they had to talk around the issue, but to still make it happen, and that goes again about that interpersonal experience. I know what I was saying. So like I studied soap writing with this wonderful writer, Susan Sojourner Collier, and I remember just when we were like writing exercises, it would literally be like, we'd have like she'd give me like a theme for a scene, and I would have to say like, write like a 2-minute scene, and then she's like, okay, so now from that 2-minute scene, what's at the pinpoint of that? So take if this back and forth, these 3 lines are the pinpoint of that. Now stretch those 3 lines out into another 2 minutes and really get even deeper into what's going on. All right. So now take these 3 lines, now that you've done that, and keep getting deeper, which is again why soaps extend for so long. I think the record was Another World. I think they had like one day, it lasted like 31 episodes or something like that. but no, so I think that's why it speaks to me. So I think we're very much similar in terms of that. So now, does that come about from your studies? So now I know you have your PhD. So what was your undergrad in?
Well, basically, I came out of my BA was in English literature and theatre studies, and then I did a master's in fine art, and then that segued into this PhD, which kind of combined everything. So it's kind of an interdisciplinary subject, really. But I think it ties into what we were saying about the emphasis on kind of personalities, personae, and how certain figures are really compelling to us. Just the personality of a character kind of can spark off something that's huge in an audience. Can really spark off a kind of can really start a wave, if you like. So where am I going with this? So I'd say that my interest in the American soap operas particularly is that all the characters are very archetypal, in the sense that they're very kind of mythical, and my interest is, I like naturalism, but I also like that kind of mythical quality, which
like
is
where you have like the hero, the damsel in distress, the villain,
kind of, and also kind of just the evocation of it, in the sense that you have like the sun god hero, and then the kind of femme fatale, the wise crone, and just that kind of that more primal way of looking at drama, which is ancient, which, like, the ancient Greeks kind of did all their plays, which are very kind of melodramatic. That kind of primal, I think it's kind of metaphysical, because it's kind of, they always evoke the gods. So I think that's where my interest in it lies. That's the kind of the root of my interest, is this kind of mythical quality to, because when they do a lot of close-ups and stuff, and I think that you can really get to the soul of a character through that, and you can't get that in big budget. Well, you can, but the kind of big budget films where the world is more important than the actual person.
Right.
So big budget films, it's all about kind of presenting a world, a spectacle, and I'm more interested in a kind of interpersonal, kind of intimate, interior world.
Yeah.
And so this segues, I think, into why, because you were saying, you're wondering why soaps get such a bad rap. And I think it's because they kind of present this interior world, and most people are not interior people. They are people of the world. It's about kind of exploring outside.
Right, and like kind of reacting to what's going on without you, as opposed to,
And kind of the heroic story is the exterior. So it's usually the male point of view, the man's adventures through the world, and the kind of the epic quality. It's about events, whereas historically the female narrative is about emotions and about that interior life, because historically she has been kind of contained within a kind of domestic sphere, not afforded the same kind of liberties, and it's given kind of the female kind of perspective such kind of depth of character, I think.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, because like every now and then there have been like shows that have attempted to kind of do that from the male point of view, and they don't. Like, I don't know if it ever aired in the UK. There was a show called Men of a Certain Age. It starred Ray Romano and I forget who else. And it was a really good show, and it was really this quiet drama about conversations, and it was like these three men who were friends, and they were all kind of like, one's going through like a really heavy midlife crisis, one's like trying to like reconnect with their son, one's trying to, and it was really that, and it never caught on. And I know that the I worked for Time Warner at the time. It was on TNT.
Yeah.
And I know that they really, like, the staff and the execs really loved the show, and they like really pushed the show, and I think they aired it for longer than they normally would have aired another show, just because. So I think it's interesting how like you say, like women aren't necessarily afforded that same luxury to be as external, et cetera. But I kind of say the same for men, like.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think the kind of in terms of like the limitations, I think it's shown a great depth. So I think there was an advantage in the soap opera format, in the sense that it was showing nuance of character, which
Yeah.
outside narratives can never tell, because they're so concerned with events.
Right.
Like all of like primetime television was about what was it? It was like Miami Vice, and all of those shows were kind of very, very masculine, kind of high energy shows. And I think the daytime soap opera, it slows everything down. You get it's more rich for an actor to play, because you get more emphasis on kind of the person themselves.
Versus the plot.
It's changed, obviously. It's become more like prime time. But my theory about why it's so disrespected is because of that kind of femininity, that feminine quality. Emotion is looked down upon. It's perceived as, I mean, in this country they call it.
But like it's perceived as like weak, and
it's perceived as it's perceived as sentimental, and sentiment is looked down upon. Romance, anything that's about feelings instead of just reason. And I also think it's disrespected because the stories never end. And I think most people want to, when they perceive a work of art, it has to be a complete thing.
It has to be finished, right? Like it's like
because men want to quantify it, and want to kind of like say, what's the quality of this? What's the quality of this piece? Because if it's something that doesn't end, it's ambiguous, because you don't quite know what it's, you don't know if you want to align with it, because it can never end.
Right.
I think it's the ambiguous factor of daytime drama.
That's really interesting that you say that, though, especially because, again, the ambiguity. And I think that maybe like you're really onto something, in the sense that I think a lot of, right, entertainment is escapism, right? And the world is so, ambiguous. Life is so ambiguous. You have really, even if you think you have control over a lot, you really don't, as everyone's learning now in this environment. And so maybe that's what the thing is. It's unsettling. It's like, oh my God, I can't even control this. I can't, like you said, quantify this. I can't. So it's like, screw this. That defeats the reason why I'm even watching this in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And the characters kind of they're just very. It's the dominant figures in the soap are usually the woman, because the woman's emotional kind of impact is so powerful within the narrative. Because I suppose even on something like The Young and the Restless, Victor's storylines are usually him reacting to the women in his life. He has his business storylines and stuff, but you can never get to the power of his character unless he's either reacting to one of his wives or his daughter's emotional life. So when Eric Braeden gets to be vulnerable, it's like when Nikki was had her back injury. I don't know if you watched it at the time, and they spent about 2 years where she was hooked on pills and in terrible.
I remember that. I wasn't watching it, but I remember just keeping up with the story.
And the men in her life were helpless. I suppose to say they were impotent. And on a primetime show, is never presented as kind of like powerless.
Right.
She was in control of her own life, so she would not get help when they wanted her to get help. So you got to see the femininity really of Victor. Victor became desperate and vulnerable, and I think that feminine power femininity is so powerful, because masculinity can be quite kind of off-putting, because it's very kind of like coarse and very it's not very subtle, whereas feminine energy is not only subtle but it's kind of all-consuming, and it kind of like takes you in to this state, this higher state. This is just my own theory.
Totally.
But I think it does take you to this higher state of awareness.
Yeah.
Deeper sentiments about life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Were there, so wait, so which of the American, so tell me this, because I actually, I never really got into the British soaps. Primarily because they really weren't, up until recently, they weren't really readily available here in the
Yeah,
States. Um, but I've kind of kept, kind of known what's happened, and I actually, it's so funny, just just really on like a drunken whim, I subscribe to BritBox, which is
yeah,
the app, the BBC and ITV,
yeah.
and all of the shows are on it. So I'm like, okay, I think I need to, especially since there's like no soaps left in America, maybe I'm gonna need to kind of get into this. What is it about the British drama, the British daily serial, um, that differs from the American? Because you specifically said you were really drawn
Yeah.
to the American uh, uh, the American daytime dramas
Yeah.
because of they're kind of set up with the mythical archetypes, and that's what drew you in. What is it about the UK soaps that differ?
I think that fundamentally the UK soaps are very naturalistic, and they don't go for kind of even in terms of like classical Hollywood, it was kind of grand acting, it was grand emotion,
Yeah, very big and over
very
the over
very big
larger
and
than life.
larger than life, and there was sentiment and there was a sense of romance, not just in kind of like love stories, but a sort of romantic way of looking at life, which I find is more kind of spiritual. Whereas the British soaps are very kind of like harsh and no holds barred, kind of. They're very suspicious of emotion, and I guess by saying that, suspicious of kind of like anything kind of like feminine, anything that's kind of introspective, anything introspective. The British are very wary of. Um,
Right.
I think that kind of stiff upper lip kind of
Yeah.
mentality, where if you go on about your kind of emotional state of mind too much, you're ridiculed. So there's kind of like a biting sense of humor in this country that doesn't have any time for kind of earnest
Yeah. Well,
feeling.
it's a very reservedness. I know that the British,
Yeah,
compared to Americans, I mean, Americans will tell you everything, like just culturally, like
yeah.
Americans spill the beans, and Americans will just much more emotional.
What is true, I think, in terms of the English upper classes, they're very reserved. But the working class in England have a lot of feeling. But I'd say again, it kind of like a lot of the English soaps are set in working class communities. But again,
Mhm.
there isn't much room for kind of sentiment, or
Right.
kind of if you kind of like have a grandeur about something, people are suspicious of it. I mean, the only character in British soaps that I think really was larger than life and kind of glamorous was a character called Bette Lynch in Coronation Street, who was like,
Uh-huh.
she dominated the show for years. But she was very kind of um, her emotions were like the women of American dramas,
Yeah.
and I do think that there was like a that's why she dominated the show. Ultimately, it became about her kind of her emotional landscape. So I think that fundamentally both are the same in terms of the setup, but as you said, the sensibility towards life is so different,
Yeah. It's
and I'm
like,
drawn to that
keep
romance.
calm and carry on versus live free or die.
Yeah, and I just love the kind of the no holds barred melodrama sometimes, and I think that some actors just kind of like shine when they get to be very transcendental and
Hmm.
like very large, like all these film queens like Joan Crawford, Betty Davis.
Yeah.
Goes back to that.
Yeah,
And
well, when I think about that, the person, like when I think about characters, and particularly people and they were played by, or maybe or I should say the actresses who really excelled in this particular medium
yeah,
because of that. Think of like she just passed away recently, Marge Dusay. Did you used to
yes,
watch? Like I think she like excelled doing the
oh
Alexander Spalding, being so over the top, darling, and
yeah,
I think Jeannie Cooper did that very very well
yeah.
as well. Yeah, yeah.
And
I'm just kind
everything
of
they
thinking
used,
about it.
everything was about kind of presentation, And I remember I was watching about, ballroom culture, Paris is Burning documentary, and they referenced in that the soap operas when they were talking about stuff that they were inspired by.
Mm-hmm.
The women in the daytime soaps it's about the kind of the look as much as it's about the emotion. So, say Mrs. Chancellor on Y&R, it was about like her nails were like talons. You see this kind of like pose like that, with the smoker's voice, and it was all very kind of grand and just like opulent.
Yeah.
In terms of the person, not in terms of like, I don't just mean like in terms of they lived in like luxurious places. The personality was luxurious.
Yeah.
And that is the quality which I think in British soaps is lacking.
So it's more American soaps, you'd say, are like more aspirational in their quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't even necessarily see aspiration in terms of material things. I just think aspirational to a kind of large,
just be bigger than oneself.
Like yearning, the yearning emotion. That's the title of one of the soaps, Another World, is about yearning for a different life, another way of living.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the key ingredient, is that kind of yearning quality, and it goes across because it's not just yearning for like a better life materially, but in terms of yearning for love, for acceptance, for understanding. And I think that those themes are really the American dramas always were just hit right in the heart of.
Totally. Speaking, you actually brought me back to Another World because you posted a scene with Rachel Corrie and Carl Hutchins, and I remembered it because that was around the time that I started watching that show, because I remember when Carl Hutchins came back, and I remember it was all ominous. He comes out of the thing. Remember they always end it with like a big freeze frame, and I remember I was like, who's this guy? And I remember that scene, and I was talking to a very good friend of mine named Chris, who's also we grew up together, and we've always been soap fans, and I forgot how good of a show that was.
Yeah.
Just the tone. I feel like every show and kind of has its own feeling. It has its own, like, it gets you in a specific zone. And the zone of that show, you were like almost like hypnotized, and the back and forth was it was dramatic, but at the same time it was very to the point. And it was very poignant, and I felt that they always had such a really, I think they had a pretty consistent writing staff, and I think that helps. But they always had a way of, I think, even if you didn't watch the show, if you just happened to catch a scene, you kind of intuitively knew what was going on and what the relationships were, and what they were striving for. That was so sad when that show got canceled. That was such a good show.
Yeah, it was almost like the beginning of the end, wasn't it, for everything?
Yeah.
If that show was cancelled, like all of them were then endangered species.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually kind of worried now because there's 4 shows left on American TV. Because they always pinpoint that when the soaps really had their decline was during the O.J. Simpson trial, because the soaps were preempted for so long. And again, watching a soap, a big part of it is just the habit of doing so. And when you fall out of the habit, then you just don't, you might go back. And I'm kind of worried that now, just with the world the way that it is now, every day I still watch My Bold and the Beautiful, even though they're like on the same scene they were in 1997. But like,
life, isn't it?
What'd you say?
It's still Brooks, like Love Line.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk about that. Like, literally, I happen to turn it on. I don't watch it daily anymore, but like just through the years now, I always kind of just check in and see how the old friends are doing. And Brooke did something and didn't tell Ridge, and so now Ridge is walking out, and it's like the same thing over and over again. That show also, and I remember thinking about this when I was doing Our World, and I wrote a pilot for another show called World of Hope. This is years ago when I was doing the soap thing, and I feel like that show is also speaking of the external and like, how, big budget and prime time and movies are all about the external, why soaps don't work in like a major city. Like you have to be in this small town, because the only thing I ever think when I'm watching the show is, are these literally the only 10 people in Los
Yeah.
Angeles? Like you can't find anybody else to date in Los Angeles.
So true. That's it. You suspend your disbelief in that sense, because so many characters would have just left. Like, say, the character of Phyllis on Y&R, there's no way she would have stayed in Genoa City for, 25 years?
Yeah.
No family there, no roots, It's so unreal. It kind of, I found that in the last 20 years, they've kind of frozen, they put all the shows into kind of static, and they just recycle the same storylines with the same.
What do you think that is? Do you think that's fear, like of alienated? Because like at the end of the day, it's dying. Period.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, 20, 30 years from now, there are not going to be any dramas on TV presented in that way. It is. So I wonder do you think it's kind of like okay, we're not really able to get any new people anymore. Young people aren't coming in during the summertime to watch the shows and getting hooked on the shows. So let's just kind of freeze it and like not alienate the folks who are currently watching, like just to kind of hold on to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's only been a couple of times that I remember like where they tried to do something outside of the box, and that was when Loving became the city.
Yeah.
Which I think is fabulous. Loving was always I'm sorry?
It's very daring to do that.
And it was done well.
Yeah.
And then the other show, they tried it, they failed. But I think it was ahead of its time, was when the last ditch effort to kind of resurrect Guiding Light. When they went to that kind of, they had like the show house and they did all the exteriors.
We always say that they tried to make it into kind of a British soap opera, because the British soaps are all on exterior sets. They build, like there's a soap we have called EastEnders, where they built like the whole square outside with the pub, and action is on this kind of outdoor set. So I think Guiding Light tried to do that but in a way they were just trying to cut corners, weren't they, with the budget?
Well, that was absolutely. I mean, I think that was like the big thing, right? I think that they were just they had no budget, and they're like, okay, let's do it. And the thing is, it came across as cutting corners, because it was like a really, really, the production quality was bad. But at the same time, I also think that it was a bit ahead of its time. So, I mean, aside from the fact you had the stupid wobbly cameras and all of that jazz, I think that just, there were like, even like primetime shows weren't necessarily filming that way. And 5 or 6 years later, after the show got canceled, that kind of more rugged style kind of came in vogue. So I kind of think that it was a little bit ahead of its time. Again, soap operas leading the way.
But maybe things go in cycles, because I'm hoping that there'll be a return to that kind of studio-based kind of lighting with background music. And emotional storytelling. I know that we live in an era now where kind of sentiment is not in vogue. Everything has to be kind of ironic and cool, and anything that's kind of earnest is a little bit kind of sneered at.
Yeah.
Hoping that this what we're going through now, this pandemic, people kind of want to see
slow down a little bit,
and they want to see yearning stories again, and they want to see things about love instead of money.
Yeah.
But they want to see things about kind of, because aspiration is just part of human life. We all have that. But I still think there's things in life which are quite kind of pure, and losing that. And it's nice to see it, that kind of first love.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I mean, I think it's two things, right? Like, I think that we've now gotten to a place where, I mean, like, if you look at like Gen Z, it's all, most of them don't even watch like television as we know it. It's all about short form content with authentic personalities who are just either spilling their guts or whatever it is, like, and and then separately, I think just the way that the world evolved with technology and being so global, and we have to do 18 things at once to keep everything going. Just there wasn't time to sit through a soap opera, right? It will be interesting since the world shut down and everyone has kind of been forced to kind of reevaluate their value system, right? And what really matters versus what doesn't.
Yeah.
It will be interesting as everything reopens, because it's going to be a very slow, long process, how quickly we kind of go back to where's my BlackBerry to, or if we do go back in that same way. So I think there could possibly be a way, but I just don't know that telling a story over 5 hours a week. I think that we've just, in terms of our attention span culturally, I just feel like we've kind of evolved past that,
That's totally true. There's no attention span anymore, and it's nobody's fault because it's just the way we've been conditioned. Because as we've had more channels, and then with the internet explosion, social media, we can do so many things at once. It's crazy. Whereas in like the 1970s, a scene on a soap opera would go on for about 8 minutes non-stop. And I think you'd get so much from the actor, like you had Mac and Rachel having a fight,
Yeah.
It would build up. I mean, I wasn't born then. I was born.
But there wasn't that like, okay, we're gonna do a 2-minute scene and then we'll cut and then we'll cut back and then we'll cut back and then we'll cut back. No, I recognized that. Like, so when I was studying soap writing, there was a channel. I don't know if they rolled it out in the UK. There was a channel that ABC owned called SoapNet.
We didn't have any of the American soaps. I only kind of discovered them. My initiation was we had The Bold and the Beautiful ones, but once we got internet access, I was introduced to them through kind of like reading synopses and stuff.
Right.
Then, like with the advent of YouTube, I've really been able to kind of educate myself on all the histories of the different and the actors that really drew me in. But anyway, going back to what you were saying, sorry.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they aired every single day, they aired Ryan's Hope.
Yeah.
And I would watch. Have you ever seen any episodes of Ryan's Hope?
Yeah, I posted a few of that.
Well, I was hooked because they had like literally they would start and like I think over like a multi-year period they did. I think they would show 2 episodes a day, but they started from the pilot episode, and then I think that they would go up to like 1981. But then like after this point, I think there was some licensing issues, so then they'd start back at the pilot. So I was watching this show in real time as though it were 1977, and I was just so amazed that like literally it's a 30-minute show, it was a half-hour show, but there literally would maybe be 2 scenes. And like the first act is just one scene that's like a conversation between like Maeve Ryan and one of her kids, and it's a play, it's like just a stage play, and you just get sucked in, and it's so sad that we don't have that attention span, because like you said, it's like a slow build and then it just crescendos, and then you're just like, okay, I gotta tune in tomorrow.
Well, it's like the best kind of, I suppose it's like the best sex, really, isn't it? It's just slow, and there's foreplay.
Exactly.
But going back to what you said, that key word, I think, is theatre, and I think the soaps I do consider them to be theatre. They were, and at one point they were live, so they were like live plays. And I think the thing about theatre, which is so different from film, is it's completely kind of immediate. And so it's kind of what you get is something that's completely spontaneous and kind of the actor's response. And I love the kind of everyone always sneers, oh, it looks like a soap opera, because of the way the image looks. But the image, I think someone like Tyler Perry has retained this. It looks like a stage play. It looks like it's actually happening in front of you. Whereas the film quality takes you to a more kind of remote, a more aloof environment. Not as kind of it's not as powerful for me.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, film has its power and its advantages, But I just think like when you strip down to that kind of basic stagecraft, with actors become the forefront.
Because that's what they do. That's
Yeah.
what you're going. Because the thing is, right? You always say film is a director's medium, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the director. Television, primetime television is the writer's medium, right? It's all they call the shots. But in live theater, it's really the actor's medium, because the writer can do all they want and the director can tell them. But like once the curtain's up, the actors have free reign to do whatever they want.
Exactly, and that's why I think daytime drama is the actor's medium as well, because however ridiculous a storyline was, say the Reva Shane clone storyline, because an actress like Kim Zimmer is so authentic in everything she does, and she's so kind of relatable and believable and moving, she sold it, and you completely believed it. And it's a ridiculous story, it's a ridiculous premise. But if the actor is kind of that authentic and soulful, I think they can do it. So the actor can do anything, really.
Absolutely. Speaking of ridiculous storylines, do you have a storyline aside from that one that you kind of think about as like, what were they smoking in that writer's room when they pitched this idea?
I think the one that really gets to me is Crystal Chappelle as Carly Manning being buried alive.
Oh, and then they have like a speaker in there for a tonic.
Doing an element, put a speaker in to accentuate Carly's torture. And it even gave her she had an oxygen tank in there or something. She had
Days of Our Lives got pretty crazy. Days wasn't a show that I watched, but I just, again, like I was a big soap fan, so I'd always read my soap days. So I always knew what was going on. Didn't Marlena become like the devil or something, or wasn't she like possessed by a demon or something?
But the thing is, that storyline is it goes back to what I was saying about mythical.
Yeah.
Obviously mythical. But it was interesting because Stefano visited her at night in the months leading up to that, and it was called the Queen of the Night storyline. And he took her into this kind of dream world, and we never knew if it was a real or if it was her dreaming. And it was almost like the devil tempting Christ with the glory of the world,
Uh-huh.
So it had this real biblical, mythical power to it. And you got the sense that it was like a decadent environment that she was being tempted with, and that is the cause of her possession. So it was almost like an allegory. It was like a metaphor for kind of like a decadent world. Once you kind of get too hedonistic, you become ill and you waste away. And I think her being possessed she was wasted away from kind of Stefano's influence. So it was totally realistic in a kind of psychological sense.
Yeah.
Even the story was like a fairy tale. It was authentic in a completely different way.
Totally.
And I think there was something about that storyline in the Buried Alive one. They played it very straight. They didn't play it self-consciously camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem is when you play it self-consciously for laughs, it's no longer like as campy. It's no longer as opulent.
Right.
Deidre Hall never betrayed any emotional beat in that storyline. She played it completely straight.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes much more kind of potent, I think, because of that.
Yeah.
Whereas it's just been silly, we would not be talking about it today.
Well, so does that mean you weren't a fan of Passions? Because Passions became like this over the top.
It was a huge thing, but that personally isn't to my taste, because I feel like the actors were too kind of self-aware of the stupidity of the storylines, and it kind of ruined it for me. I like it when the actors kind of play it straight, even though it's ridiculous. They are. There's a scene on Guiding Light where Reva, and it was Kim Zimmer's Emmy submission, and she says to Josh something like, "This woman has no identity because there's only one Reva Shane in this world, and she's standing right here in front of you." It was so ridiculous, but she said completely straight.
Yeah.
That is the key. You have to play it straight, and the queerness or whatever, or the camp, will be self-evident after it, with the finished product.
Totally. I think you might be scraping your microphone because I don't You got it?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I just hear you scraping your microphone, so I don't want anyone to miss anything that you're saying.
Sorry.
No worries, go for it.
Yeah, so I love those I love it when kind of the nerve to play something ridiculous, but play it in a way that's sincere.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something and I think in a way maybe it's because they began in the theatre or something, so they're not afraid of anything that the writer can throw at them. So there's they can always fall back on something that's very authentic and very kind of believable because they've been trained to do that. Whereas I think actors that probably don't get the training in kind of theatre, they could be a bit cast adrift.
Yeah.
To kind of like more ambitious work,
Totally. No, totally. So I'm trying to think of who else was ever like really over the top. Santa Barbara was kind of an over the top show. I mean, they were a little comical in how they.
Yeah. I think they had a really wry sense of humor, kind of British sense of humor in a way. That kind of because I remember Mason Capwell, played by Lane Davis, he walks in on Robin Matson being slapped and slapping Justin Dees, I think it is, and he says something like, "Oh, it's another evening of parlour games by the Marquis de Sade." And that's the line that only kind of that kind of sophisticated like in gag. I love it.
Yeah, because it's a little farcical.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. That's so funny. Well, do you have like what will go down as your all-time like where you said, this is as far as it could be a story arc or it could be a moment where you're just like, yes, this is the pinnacle of what this medium excelling to the highest that it can ever excel.
Oh, to be honest, I have dozens. But I'll take you off the top of my head. I really liked. I know this is in terms of this is kind of outlandish, but I liked Reva's return storyline from the dead because I felt that it was very ambitious to kind of like have her be a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
But they later clarified that she was like an astral projection of herself from a coma. So the ghost really was it was her willpower from the coma kind of channeling her soul back into Springfield. And I just thought that there's something so kind of poignant about the premise of a dead woman or a seemingly dead woman appearing to the people that had lost her, as a ghost, but dropping kind of signs of her existence.
Yeah.
And trying to kind of check that Annie was going to be a good wife to Josh and look after her children. And then when Reva wakes up from the coma and becomes like an Amish woman, it's just the storyline, even though it's completely implausible, it was just you really got to go on the journey with her from kind of like reclaiming from that kind of like that primal situation to reclaiming her life.
Totally. And I think what's so great about it also, in hindsight, is that it's really true to and aligns to the roots of that show, right? Because it was originally about this pastor and being this kind of like spiritual guide to this entire community. So I think it even though it sounds like an outlandish storyline, it's very, very true to the soul of the show and the DNA of the show. Absolutely.
Because it's the journey back to she lost her life, and my thesis was on this kind of idea of the liminal, that kind of in state where you've lost your identity and you're on the verge of finding a new one, but it's the process. It's called I suppose all the mythologists would call it the hero's journey, where you have to go through ordeals to reclaim your birthright or reclaim your identity. And I think the storyline where Reva kind of reclaims her life, it touches on that. And
absolutely. I'm hearing a little interference on your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
And other storylines that I really like the Karen Wolek storyline where she lived a double life.
The which storyline?
The Karen Wolek storyline on One Life to Live.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was like the
Where
Judith Light. It culminated with Judith Light's big courtroom scene. Yeah.
and it culminates in the kind of the double. And what's interesting about that to me is that it utilizes the domestic sphere of the traditional soap opera. You know, the woman within the home, but the life that's being lived in secret beyond the home, that kind of otherness.
Yeah.
Kind of that kind of danger, that's something that's looming on the outside that's going to destroy the perfect world within. She played that so well, that kind of that precarious balance of, you know, the two sides. But I really like the storyline with the Sheila crossover.
Oh my goodness, that was that. Can I tell you? I think that. So I've always watched Bold and the Beautiful. I never really watched Young and the Restless, but I had family like so. But I always knew what was going on Young and the Restless, but I never like recorded it. But that Sheila crossover storyline, I remember that's when I started watching Young and the Restless with that whole Sheila thing, and then they brought her over to Los Angeles. Oh my God, that actually might be my favorite storyline in like the history of soaps.
Yeah,
that was so good. Must see TV. Oh my God. And then the other thing that I remember as being like the pinnacle of soap telling. You watched The Bold and the Beautiful. You've seen The Bold.
Yeah.
Another person who is so larger than life, who was so amazing. I think you posted about her recently, Sally Spectra.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever saw the series of episodes when she realized, remember, she was married to Clark Garrison, right? She's this big older woman, and he's like this kind of suave playboy. And they find out that he's really marrying her and staying married to her up until a certain point, because after, like, I think a certain point, a certain date, the way that the prenuptial agreement is set up, he gets like half of her money, and she realized it. And so they, up until like the final moment, her and Saul, rest his soul, and Darla like plot to kick Clark out. I remember that being one of the most thrilling roller coaster rides in the world, and it was so fun. Again, it was so over the top.
They were like her band of misfits, weren't they?
Yeah.
And he was trying to con her and take, you know, he was going to make her son illegitimate or whatever.
So yeah.
I don't want your son to have my name. So again, it's that kind of thing that goes back to like the woman's picture in Hollywood. It's the women kind of coming into their own.
Yeah.
The genre for it, you know. Definitely.
Oh, so good. I need to see if that, because I love how some fans, you know, one of the things I do love about YouTube, even though, you know, content theft is a thing. Yeah. I love how, like, you know, the super fans will, you know, will put together, for example, kind of like the last storyline on As the World Turns with what's his name, Luke and Noah. Yeah. You know, like someone's like put together the entire romance from start to finish of just their scene, and you can just relive like an entire story arc. Oh God, I wonder if someone's done that for that Clark and Sally, because that was so wonderful. Oh, I miss that character so much.
She was brilliant. She had what not only did she have that canon sensibility, but it's what I was saying about Kim Zimmer, that kind of like earthy, you know, the Earth Mother kind of really believable, really kind of like real.
Yeah, yeah.
You just want to be, you bask in their glow.
Yeah.
I love it.
I do hate, speaking of characters, I really do hate, and I guess I get why they did it, because the character's so larger than life that it's wonderful. I really do hate, though, that when Darlene Connolly died, that they didn't give the character like a proper send-off, you know, because there's so many moments. But at the same time, I do think the way that they sent her off, she's living on the Canary Islands with like 20 houseboys or something. Yeah. Is true. But that was.
But you're right, she didn't get a tribute. Like when June Cooper died, they had like episodes where all the old actors came back and discussed her off camera. Mm-hmm. And I think that Darlene Connolly definitely deserved that kind of tribute as well. Because those are the actors that we really remember. They're
totally.
Like tentpole characters.
I'm still hearing. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm still hearing the scraping.
I'm so sorry. Hang on, let me move back because I'll move back to where I was sitting before.
Okay, cool. I don't know what that was. That was like really strange.
Yeah.
Well, listen. I want to keep this conversation going, but unfortunately, for the folks who are listening on Hot 702, it is time to say goodbye to Dr. Adam Ghani. Thank you so much for joining us on the radio show. But and thank you all for listening. And we're going to actually keep this conversation going. So tomorrow you'll be able to find it on the podcast Showtime with Jordan von Haslow. I forgot my own name. Showtime with Jordan von Haslow.
Thank you so much for having me. It was thrilling to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for Martini Mondays on Hot 702.5 FM Vegas. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Great.
On with the show. So, so they didn't give her, what were we talking about? Because we were talking about Darlene Conley. They didn't really give her a big, and again, like, I just hate that because she was such a great character, and Darlene Conley was like, I really feel like she found her niche as an actress, and it was so wonderful. But at the same time, having her go off to live in the Canary Islands with a bunch of young men it's a very Sally Spectra thing to do.
Fantasy, isn't it? For sure. And that was so, and also her interaction with Stephanie Forrester, which is great.
Go back and
yeah. You had kind of Susan Flannery as the kind of like austere, very kind of moral, uppity matriarch.
Mm-hmm.
And Darlene Conley was total antithesis.
Mm-hmm.
So this wonderful tennis match.
Yeah, well, what was great about it that I think was missing between the animosity between Stephanie and Brooke, right? Or on Young and the Restless, the animosity between Kay Chancellor and Jill, is the fact that at the end of the day, Kay is older and the grande dame, right? Stephanie is older than Brooke and the grande dame. So she's coming from a place of power that this person doesn't have. Whereas what made the Stephanie Sally rivalry so good is that, okay, even though Stephanie has the older money or whatever it is, they're like equals. So it's not like this person up here and this person up here, like, fighting. It's like these are two broads who are like on the same toe, the same place, and like really want the same thing, but because of their life circumstances are coming at it in a totally different way that neither person can understand. And so that's what I think is thrilling when you see like this fight amongst equals.
Yes. Exactly it. And they both have that gravitas in their own ways, that kind of that real depth of character. And when an actor is a bit kind of green.
Yeah.
And that's why I think an actor like, say, if you watch how Cynthia Watrous evolved on Guiding Light,
at
the beginning, she was good, but she only became like really remarkable once Kim Zimmer was like her frequent co-star.
Mm-hmm.
And Cynthia found the character, and she just became what I actually think she was kind of like borderline genius. When Annie was kind of losing the plot and fall from grace on the witness stand, and then becoming like the pariah of Springfield. And Cynthia was not only was she kind of completely larger than life, but she was very poignant. And I think it was working with Kim, which was her kind of acting school, really. And she's a brilliant actress. So I love that. It's what you were saying about the tennis match of equals, on a stage. It's so exciting. That's why we watch. It's that.
Yeah.
It goes back to what I was saying earlier about archetypes. It's the different archetypal energies kind of combining.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Oh God. Sorry.
There's so many storylines. I don't even have a top 10. I love Natalie on All My Children and her evolution. She came in the show as a kind of Erica's love rival, but she became this kind of romantic heroine, and I loved her emotional kind of arc on the show. And I think
Yeah.
Kate Collins was so underrated as an actress. I think she's
Yeah.
my favorite. She's my absolute favorite. And then I loved Anne Heche on Another World as the twins because she gave them completely different mannerisms. And this girl,
Yeah.
19 years old.
So I started watching that show. So I started watching soaps, I would say like 1991-ish.
Yeah,
So Anne Heche, so when I watched it, Jensen Buchanan was
yeah,
playing it. I'm not as
she was
familiar
fantastic.
with Anne Heche's run on the show. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's not cool. I think Anne Heche started in 87, late 87. She was on until 91.
Right, and that's about the time I probably started watching it, like right after she left the
Yeah.
show. Yeah. Oh
And
my.
in a way, I feel that, I mean, I wouldn't say this for Julianne Moore, but I think with Anne Heche, it's like she's never had a character that has been as deep, or characters as deep
Hmm.
as the one she played on that show. And I feel that actors, I feel like if you get a role of a lifetime on a soap, you're just so lucky because you
Hmm.
can play everything.
You can play everything, and if you're a fan favorite, you can work for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I remember watching an interview with Joan Collins, and she was talking about how, like season 2 or season 3 of the show, I forget who the person was, the character was, but they decided to leave. I guess they just kind of thought, like, okay, I'm on a hot show now.
Oh,
Now's my
yeah.
now is my chance, to become a movie star or whatever. And I remember she was like, dude, that's like the opposite of like rats running off of a sinking ship.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, this
Yeah.
is probably as good as it's going to get. So we need to milk it and enjoy it and revel in it.
Yeah. Because Joan got Dynasty. I think we call it Dynasty in England. We pronounce
Uh-huh.
it. She got it when she was, I think, 50.
Yeah.
So she paid her dues as an actor,
Mm-hmm.
So she knew that this was like the pinnacle. And I guess Pamela Sue Martin kind of was thinking of, I can go on to films or whatever. But Joan was probably speaking from her own experience about what a kind of unique
Situation.
phenomenon. Yeah.
This show that's like the biggest show, like again, like that kind of a thing happens. I mean, like if you look at like, that's like think about like a show like Friends, right? They've all gone on to great careers and such. No one, they will never have that kind of success in television ever again. Like you can't repeat that. It's the equivalent of winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning. So
Yeah.
again, revel in it and milk it for as long as you can.
Yeah.
My favorite show, and it was always like the little engine that could, and it always gets really bad rep because they did like always have like every 2 years they had a new writing team, and I guess it was schizophrenic, but it was the first soap I ever remember like watching, like I was like a little kid, and I think it was the opening of the show, like really, the opening, the graphics of the opening, I remember it was probably like 6 or 7, I guess, drew me in. And so I started watching, and I'm sure most of it like went way over my head. But then as I got older and like in like 91 really started coming back, and like I was like, I kind of wonder how I got through junior high school. Because then I look back, I was taping and watching like 3.5 or 4 hours of soaps a night.
Yeah. Well, I think that the characters on because it's like, because it's naturalistic in the sense that it's every day. I think that the characters are like become substitutes to people in our own lives, and I think that sorry, my phone's going. Can I come back to you in a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Stopped. Hang on. What was I going to say? I think that characters become substitutes for people in our own lives. So, say if you've not got a good relationship with your parents, you can watch, say, Bob and Kim on As the World Turns, and they're so kind of, they're the couple, they're the parents.
They're stable, they're level-headed,
Stable.
they're caring.
They're so overly concerned about their children, and I think that they become your surrogate parents. I really do. So
Yeah.
I think that the characters on soaps were like the friends that we might not have had, or the friends we wish we had.
Totally.
Or the
No, definitely. Or the friends we wish we had. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my favorite show, like I said, it was the little show that could. And it always got like bad rep. It was always the last in the ratings. And yeah, the writing could be uneven because like every 2 years, there would be a total turnover in the writing staff. But again, I loved this show and I watched the show for such a long time up until the end, was Loving.
Yeah.
Loving was my favorite soap. And I remember really, really getting into it. I guess it worked in terms of getting kids in during summer. It was like 1991 when Laura Sisk and oh God, what's his name? He's on NCIS now. Michael Weatherly and the Noxzema girl, Rebecca Gayheart, when they had that whole frat, they were all like in college, and oh my God, I just remember so well. Again, show gets like no props whatsoever. No one ever watched the show, but the Loving Murders, the way that they ended that show was one of the greatest arcs in soap history. And Christine Tudor Newman's
amazing
monologue and the heartache and the, oh my God, like that, to me, that is probably one of the greatest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And oh.
No, that was so powerful. That was like Greek drama. That was like watching Medea on stage, you know. Like the mother that kills her children, and she's holding the syringe, isn't she, to her head, and you don't think she's going to stab herself, and she's like, I was trying to release them from their pain, you know, and she's really like in hysteria, and it's just that my God. In a way, they let the actor kind of really go for it, don't they? And that's what soap can do. A soap's not kind of trying to contain the narrative. It lets it unfold.
Yeah, totally. Oh God, I still get, again, someone probably has that all out because that was so good.
And you know what's interesting to me? You know, when everyone says like, what's the greatest TV show of all time? People say stuff like The Wire or like some primetime show, but I don't remember in those shows like these great emotional arcs, you know, like say with The Loving Murders where you had her meltdown at the end. I think that a lot of the performances that are great have been overlooked simply because they're emotional.
Mm-hmm.
People look down on that kind of excessive emotion or sentiment, you know.
But I think also, like you said before, you can't quantify it because to really understand like that scene, to understand that scene, you had to have seen not only just the arc of that storyline, but you had to understand the history of like her relationship with Trisha and her son and Clay, and you know what I mean, like to really understand, you know, like you want, like, you have to have, like, it's an amalgamation versus a primetime show. If you've been watching for, you know, if you watch 13 episodes, it's like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
You know, whereas, you know, that moment, that was 13 years of
story
build up to that moment, you know.
And it was like on One Life to Live, where I think it was a retcon when Dorian revealed that Vicky's father had sexually molested her as a child, and that was the reason she had split personalities, because she blocked it out. And it was the history of, I think the show was about 30 years old by then. It was 30 years of history coming in like one episode, coming to the ball with these two women like faced off. And Victoria couldn't cope, and she splits off into a new personality because she can't cope with the truth, you know. And Dorian raging at her, going, "Your father was a immoral tyrant." And Robin Strasser was so good, and she's like,
"Oh my God, I wish there was I don't know, I miss like a soap net. I wish there was a way. I would love to. I was talking to my friend Chris, like I said, when you posted that Rachel Corrie show, about we're just talking to him about it. I was like, oh my goodness, I would love, because, you know, I don't know if you remember, right when Procter and Gamble was getting out of the soap business, they changed their name so to like Telenext. So I'm assuming so that like none of the people who they wanted to sell Pampers to would be pissed and try to boycott. But for a while, they had like about a year or two's worth of episodes of Another World on YouTube. I imagine they took them down just from, it probably was,
Yeah.
just the business and legal affairs alone was probably not worth the return. But I wish that there was like a place where you could just like
Watch. Yeah.
just watch and say like, you know what, I want to relive. Like again, I think of like that 91 to 93 or 4 period as like the pinnacle of my like soap fandom. I would dedicate another 3 years of my life to relive that whole that whole period,
Just before OJ, right? It was like the that was the final golden age, wasn't it? Where you had it was almost like reading a novel. The soaps then, it was like the characters were like literary characters.
Yeah.
They were rich and textured, and it was just superlative, really. The kind of the range and the kind of intelligence. They didn't, and I think once the ratings started plummeting, I think they stopped making an effort.
Yeah. Well, they lost money. I think it's a couple things. Stop making an effort, but the budgets are cut, right? Like if you think about like, especially like Days of Our Lives, I think Days of Our Lives is like 6 months ahead of like Days of Our Lives will still totally air throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
But they were on such I think that they recorded something like an episode and a half a day.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Crazy.
And it's like you just can't. It's not even about an effort, but you just can't. Like if you basically write a week's worth of a show like that is basically 2 feature films.
Yeah.
And so if you're like, we need to produce every week we need to produce 2.5 feature films.
Yeah.
Like there isn't time for effort. It's just we just need to get it on the page, get it going, film it, go. Get it on the page, get it going. But it's so funny. I'm sorry, go for it.
I was about to say I'd rather have no shows left at all than them kind of continuing in the state they are. I mean, that's to say. But I think if people during this pandemic watch the shows now, I think that they kind of confirm all the stigmas that they have.
Oh, right. Like, see, I told you this is stupid.
Yeah, I told you.
It's slow. It's unrealistic. It's
And that's what they think they've always been like, and they haven't. And that's this is why I use my page for this, because I think we have to showcase the glory days, because I want people to see these performers that I'm worried are going to be forgotten about,
Yeah.
Like Elizabeth, Lucinda Walsh,
Oh, she was so wonderful. Another grand, larger than life. Or can we not forget frickin' Lisa Hughes?
Oh, Eileen Cole.
And she's just like that in real life. I saw her do a cabaret show in New York one year, and she's just as like feisty and over. And the woman was like damn near 80 at the time,
Incredible. She was really like the first major icon of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, I guess people just think Susan Lucci or Deidre Hall,
right,
was the one that was the very beginning. In terms of glamour, I guess.
The glamorous femme fatale, the kind of like woman, anti-hero a little bit. Yeah, totally.
It's that kind of like the dark side of all of us that kind of is not the, as you say, that kind of bad girl, but humanized.
Mm-hmm. It's very... Because even if she did some messed up things, you had empathy for her. It's like, okay, if I were that person in those circumstances, having had that background, I can understand why I might make that choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of choice, I'm sorry, go for it.
I was actually, those are the characters that are really the meat and potatoes of the genre.
Yeah.
They provide decades worth of storyline. And interesting, like Rachel Corey, she was like really hard at the beginning,
mm-hmm.
and kind of a devilish, but by the end she'd gone through so much that you could believe that she'd become a moral person.
Mm-hmm.
Been through so much turmoil.
Yeah.
And by the way, I wanted to say this earlier. Somebody like Carl Hutchins, Charles Keating, you never see a character like that on a British soap opera, because he's Shakespearean. He's very grand,
mm-hmm.
and you just never see it. So I just think
that's interesting. He was a good character. There have been some great male. Roger Thorpe.
Roger Thorpe, brilliant.
Oh my God, Roger Thorpe was. I remember when he died. Oh, that was so. Yeah. Oh, him and what was her name? Jenna Bradshaw, the jewel thief.
Yeah, Jenna Bradshaw,
Yeah,
brilliant.
I loved that. I wanted to
Uh,
become a jewel thief after watching her. I was like, that
she
would be
was
such a wonderful career move.
she was brilliant. The actress that played Jenna Bradshaw, I also loved her on One Life to Live as Gabrielle.
Uh-huh.
Gabrielle and Tina were the kind of dynamic duo. Kind of like I remember once I called them Cinderella and Rapunzel on acid because Gabrielle had the long hair and Tina was like this kind of Cinderella, and they were just like this great kind of going back to what we were saying about archetypes, kind of very very kind of like mythical, colorful characters.
Yeah.
But she was great. Fiona Hutchison's very underrated.
Is she
Uh,
still working?
I read that she was a drama coach at a school in
Okay.
upstate New York or something.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, what other male characters do you really like?
I,
And what are your favorite male?
well, like I said, I think Roger Thorpe is probably like hands down one of the greatest in the world. Adam, All My
Yeah,
Children, was
yeah.
another great male character that they really let be
Uh,
juicy. On my favorite show, even though again, yes, every 2 years there was a different actor playing the character and a different writer's team, but Clay Alden
yeah.
was a real son of a bitch. Um, I'm trying to think who else. I know I'm forgetting somebody who is like just the grand Victor Newman, of course. Um, oh, but Roger Thorpe, man.
And
Now I want to go
John
watch
Dick.
some old Guiding Light.
Yeah, I love Zaslow. I think he's so committed to the role, you know. And the great thing about him and someone like Anthony Geary on General Hospital, they didn't want to make them likable,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to kind of keep them as bastards. And because they knew there was such potent kind of storyline there, that they
Yeah.
kind of they were authentic to their characters all the way through. And I think the problem with a character like Reva, they tried to make her like the lovely mother, and it kind of betrayed the edgier.
The edgier, the slut of
Yeah.
Springfield. Yeah.
I know that
Totally.
Emma was frustrated about that because they said when Cynthia Watros was playing Annie, Reva was very much the heroine, and
Mm-hmm.
Kim Zimmer didn't want to play normal. She wanted to be that kind of. And I think the clone storyline allowed us to get back in touch with that ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but what you were saying about Adam Chandler, sorry if I'm going back and forth.
No, go for it. Go for it.
There was an episode of Oprah where she had the cast of All My Children, and Susan Lucci says, this was about 1990, Susan Lucci says, the difference between daytime and prime time is on prime time a man will be involved in a chase scene, and you
Mm-hmm.
never get to know the man, but in a daytime drama, you get the man's emotional life kind of
Mm-hmm.
case. So she spelled it out really.
Yeah.
And so David Canary probably did his best work in daytime television as a
Oh,
result.
totally. And then you get to play the brother. That
Yeah,
was oh my God, when the brother's wife died, that was a very moving storyline too.
yeah,
Cindy, was that her name?
yeah.
She died of AIDS. I remember that. Oh God. Dude, I could talk about soaps all day.
Yeah. They the characters that always had AIDS were always women, weren't they? They could never
Mm-hmm.
male. They could, and much less a gay male. They could never
Totally.
put a man with AIDS on the
That's
soaps. They
that's
were
actually
worried.
really interesting. I didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right.
Like,
You're absolutely
one
right.
was up on YNR. It was Cricket's mother that married John Abbott, and then it was in the 90s. It was Keisha who was the other woman who was having an affair with Olivia's husband.
Mm-hmm.
And Drusilla used to go and visit her and call her all these names. Do you remember that? I have to shout out to Victoria Rao because she's also one of my favorites.
Yeah, I
Love
think she's
so
a
committed.
character out in real life as well.
Yeah.
So I've heard.
She's just somebody that you just whenever she's on screen, she's going to be doing something interesting.
Yeah, very
Great.
much so.
And I love that she was also doing prime time at the same time. She
Oh,
was
that's right. She was on what, Diagnosis Murder.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she must have been the hardest working actress in the business.
No, I think that was Tamara Tooney.
Oh yeah,
Tamara Tooney was doing Law and Order. She was doing
wow.
she was doing Law and Order, and she was doing As the World Turns. Oh, I guess she was only doing 2. No, the hardest working woman in the business is Kelly Ripa.
Yeah.
When Kelly, listen to me, when Kelly Ripa, see, I don't think you'd remember this because it was, all American TV, but when Kelly Ripa took over and, for Kathy Lee and
Yes.
became Live with Regis, she was still doing All My Children. She was doing Regis and Kelly every day, and they gave her a primetime sitcom.
Oh yeah, it's called Hope and Faith. Yeah.
She was doing all 3 of those simultaneously.
Insane. That's the thing though, because I think the problem is you can never, once you're part of the soap family, you can never leave. You just can't leave it. You feel like it's leaving the family behind if you go and do something else.
Ooh, what's the scrape? Is your phone scraping on something?
I don't think so. Let me move.
That's so strange.
You can edit all this out.
Yeah.
Is that
no,
better?
but this is really strange. Oh yeah, there we go. That's good.
What was I saying? I think she probably stayed on because it's the thing about daytime is the ensemble feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really want to leave it behind. That's just my inkling.
Well, I think it's that. I think it's, again, the only, it's once upon a time, before anyone knew soaps were really in danger. It's like the only thing that you can, I think it's quality of life, right?
Yeah.
Because especially if you're like married and have children, it's really, it's a 9 to 5 job, It's the only acting job that's a 9 to 5 job. I think the steady income. And I think it's, because again, you leave a soap, you can go out and become a big success, or you could go out and fail.
Yeah.
As some people, I have a friend who told me a story about Cameron Matheson. So he was like doing his thing, and he was, ready to leave and go out to Hollywood and be a star, but he can't act. He's doing exactly what he should be doing. He's hosting a morning show now, but can't act. And apparently everyone in the writer's room knew it. So they specifically wrote him out going off on a motorcycle, knowing, and sure enough, like a year later, he came back to town on that exact same motorcycle that he left on. And I think it's that, right? You can leave and you could be, your career might not take off in the way that you were. And if you're not like this, really iconic soap character, you're recast or the soap world moves on without you. So I think there's also that too. It's like, do I stay? Do I go? And I think there is a point that after you are on a soap for a specific period of time, you're pigeonholed. You're a soap actor, and maybe you can get TV movies, but like no one is really looking at you for feature films. No one's really, so it's kind of like, like I remember reading an interview when Ron Moss left Bold and Beautiful.
Oh.
I can only imagine they must have offered him like a pay cut or so. That's the only reason I can imagine him leaving. But I remember an interview, they're like, so now, what do you want to do now that you are leaving the soaps? And remember, he like had a band that was like, they had a big hit player, and he was like, Ghani, he's on the show for like 25 years. He's not the greatest actor in the world. And I remember he was like, I believe in dreaming big. I'm hoping to maybe work with Martin Scorsese, or maybe. And it was just like, dude, like. Go back to Forrester Creations, pronto.
That was just because he's like him and Drake Hogestyn are kind of like the cliched soap actor caricatures, in terms of I think they're very nice men probably, but they're kind of like when people want to give examples of kind of soap opera acting, so to speak.
Yeah.
Drake or Ron Moss.
I remember there was an episode, I don't know, did the show Talk Soup air in the UK?
I didn't think so.
Okay, it was a show on the E! Network, and basically so it started back in the 90s when like there was this proliferation of daytime talk shows.
Yes.
And so it was hosted by a comedian, and they would take all of like the funniest and the best clips from all the daytime talk shows. As daytime talk shows went the way of the dodo, they just started incorporating just things that were great on TV, and it became a weekly show. And I have to find it, and I'm going to send it to you. There is a clip. They were making fun of The Bold and the Beautiful, and this one scene where Rick, I think, was in the hospital, and the way the script was written, he said Rick's name something like 25 times, and so it was just a mashup of him going, Rick, 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 Rick. Brilliant. I'm going to try to find it and send it to you.
Please do.
I'm sorry. Speaking about it, it's so funny.
Don't you love when characters have kind of catchphrases?
Yeah.
Like Sheila used to go, God, why are you doing this to me? She'd be like her phrase. She felt she was so self-pitying.
Totally.
Poisoning Stephanie with mercury or throwing her shrink out of a window. I don't know.
Oh my God. That was she might have been the greatest villain in soap history, honestly.
So underrated. I think she should have won an Emmy. She should have done. And I think that the problem with they never knew how to write the character in later years.
Mm-hmm.
Key to that character always play into the fact that she feels like she's doing the right thing, even when she's doing horrible things. It's always for an objective, like
totally. But see, this is one of the things I think, again, why soaps get a bad rap, and it's something they do is, just like in real life, just because the story doesn't end doesn't mean that the character should always be there. Yeah. Like at the end of that storyline, that should have been the end of Sheila forever. Yeah. That should have been, and just go down as this was this crazy woman who came into our lives and one of the most memorable times, as opposed to, because also, just realistically, if someone tries to kill you, kidnap your baby, all of this, are you then going to still interact with them on a regular basis?
It was actually, when she has the goodbye party, where she holds at gunpoint, and then Lauren talks to her, and she suddenly realizes what she's done, and she drinks the poison. She was supposed to die, and she says she's dying in Eric's arms, and she says, all I wanted was to be loved, or something.
Oh, and see,
that was the key, and she was supposed to die, but Kimberlin was so popular and didn't want to leave daytime, obviously, because of the security. They wrote her back in, but Sheila's narratively speaking, that was supposed to be the end, and it would have worked, And I feel like a character like Phyllis shouldn't have lasted as long as she has, She's not like a character like Nikki. She doesn't have like a huge kind of. She's not the center of a family,
Right.
But I suppose because Michelle Stafford's a good actress, they would keep her. But in a way, I remember having this idea. Imagine having like a soap where it's like a repertory theatre company, and every year they change the actors change character and they play a different role to what they played the year before.
But like the same characters, but like swapping it up. Like last year I played Erica. This year I'm gonna play whoever.
Yeah, it's like a new. So last year I played the rich tycoon. This year I'm gonna play someone that's really struggling in a different.
That actually. Can I tell you?
Yeah.
Ooh, you just gave me an idea. We have to talk about this offline. You just gave me a really brilliant idea.
Yeah.
All right. Put a pin in that. I don't want to talk about this publicly. You just gave me a really awesome idea. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I could talk about soaps all day. I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to know a little bit more about your thesis.
Well, basically, it was called Contemporary Art and Liminal Space, Refuge for the Divine in an Empirical World. And I'm basically arguing that the spiritual life, or the idea of the sacred or the divine, is not the exclusive, does not belong just to like organized religion. So say when you walk to a church, you think this is a divine space.
Right.
The argument is that the divine can be kind of evoked in a liminal situation. And a liminality is that point between is the kind of the corridor between status points. So it's when your life is up in the air. And so my argument is that people, in a liminal sense, they are not just their own identity, but they are taking on a divine identity from beyond. So it's a combination, and they usually do this in a political sense, or like a figure like Anne Boleyn becomes an archetypal figure. So she's no longer just a person; she's also like a symbol.
Yeah.
So she's like a divine figure. And so my thesis was about finding these figures in history and creating montage works where I contrast two people in history and detect that they are the same archetype.
Okay.
So they're playing out like a mythical story. So it's really about looking beyond the mundane and showing how people can play out divine mythical narratives that are beyond our mundane life.
That's really fascinating.
It's very. I hope I've explained that all right. Sometimes I go off.
No, you did. No, I think that's really fascinating. I think it's interesting that you did it with big history. Did you ever in your time like kind of like take just like your average schmo and like look at their life and kind of like, do you know what I mean? Versus
well,
like
actually, I used public figures because I wanted to because I feel like they played out a national drama.
Totally.
Like a drama for the nation. So I was kind of commenting. So in one video, I correlated Anne Boleyn with the woman that was in the 1960s in England that was put on trial, the Profumo scandal. She was called Christine Keeler. She was like the fall guy, even though the politician was the one that was cheating on his wife. It was the girl Christine Keeler that was kind of pilloried publicly and hung out to dry. So in a way, she was like the Scarlet Woman, like Anne Boleyn was in a day. And the Scarlet Woman is like an archetype. If you go back to the most ancient cultures like Sumerian culture, modern day Iraq, the Scarlet Woman is the goddess Inanna. She's like the goddess that everyone worshipped. So all of these figures, all of these archetypal figures are godlike.
Yeah.
You know, like there was another one where I compared Napoleon Bonaparte with, I think it was JFK, the sun hero, the hero of the sun, you know, playing out that kind of that Camelot myth, you know, that leadership. It's very, very potent. But anyway, what I did was I took footage from different biopics of these figures, and I kind of like did a split screen, and I put a hymn over the top, an incantation or an ancient hymn, and so these things play out in like one video. So I'm showing kind of divine drama going on in human narratives. I'll send you this.
Yeah, please. I would love to. I would love to check it out.
I hope I've described it all right. Sometimes I feel like I go off on a tangent when I describe
it.
But it's difficult to talk about, but when you see it, you'll understand.
Yeah, well, I can't wait. And I'm definitely gonna, like I said, you kind of put an idea in my head a little earlier. I'm gonna kind of do some research. I'm gonna circle back to you on that. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a wonderful conversation. I think you're absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And honestly, I'll talk to you anytime you want. We can do this again.
Perfect.
If you ever want anything, I'm available. I really enjoy it.
Wonderful. Well, cool. We'll have a wonderful night. And I'll talk to you real soon. Thank you guys for checking out the Showtime with Jordan von Haslow podcast, and we'll see you next week. Bye.